Welcome to another episode of Sideline Sanity with me, Michelle Tafoya, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Go to legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. As always, we appreciate their support. They've been so great to us. This is going to be an interesting show. Let me read you a tweet by our forthcoming guest. I'm here for the nuance, to explore the liminal space where truth often lies between tribalistic extremes. I want to take responsibility for the audience I am growing on Twitter, but I don't want to become another spoke in the wheels of the algorithm, a digital slave. Those are the words of Dr. Joel Brown. He is a doctor, a Christian, a centrist, a musician, a critical thinker. He's over in the UK. So it's a different time zone for him to be joining us, but he graciously agreed to talk to us. And we're going to talk about everything from, oh my gosh, where to begin? How he went from feeling like an oppressed black man to being disgusted that he used to feel like an oppressed black man. This is going to be a good one. That's next.
For nearly 3 decades, she's reported the action from the sidelines. She started very young. She's covered the NBA, NFL, Olympics, and the college football and basketball national championships. And now, during these insane times in our world, Michelle Tafoya thinks we need a serious dose of sanity. This is Sideline Sanity with your host, one of the sanest people on planet Earth, Michelle Tafoya.
Dr. Joel Brown, welcome from across the pond. Where in the UK are you exactly?
I'm based in Bradford, not far from Leeds, in the county of West Yorkshire.
Lovely. Oh, see, I'm a sucker for the accent, so you have me already. I am. I want to remind people that, I found you on Twitter, and your Twitter homepage says Christian centrist, critical thinker, staff writer at Wrong Speak, which we've had Adam Coleman on, medical doctor, singer-songwriter, attending Life Church Home.
Yeah.
You have an amazing array of things that you're involved in. Yeah. But really, it seems to me what your Twitter account is efforting to do is sort of give a slap in the face to this wokeism that we're all living in, this insanity. What brought you to that?
Yeah, great question. I love the fact that you started talking about my other interests. And I think it's important to make clear, and I think this is the case for so many silent observers of this woke insanity, is that we just want to go about living our lives, whether you're a dad, whatever your faith might be, your profession. But I love the title of this notion of sideline sanity. It's like, it feels like sanity has been pushed to the sides, and you have this sort of insane normalization of ideas that are so contrary to the values that we all hold that will help our societies flourish. And I think for me, one might say it's not particularly politically or professionally expedient to be as vocal as I am about the things that I talk about on Twitter, because of course, people worry legitimately about being cancelled and so on. But I think for me, as someone, as a father, as someone who's just seen so much, and I've just got to a point where I felt I needed to be able to, one, talk about my own story, where I felt I was caught up in much of this myself, and the dangers of that, and the fact that I feel we're at a tipping point if we don't start speaking about it. It's going to run away even worse.
I completely agree with that. And that's why I left my previous job to do this. I felt like some of us have to just kind of put the brakes on this thing and be willing to take a little bit of the risk on. And I'm so heartened to see that you're doing that. You said that you were kind of into it at one point. You were on the other side, if you will. How did that occur, first of all?
Yeah. And I'll explain it this way, because I think it's useful just bringing a little bit of backstory. So, I grew up in a fairly conservative home in the lovely island of Jamaica, and then moved to the UK when I was about 16 with my parents. So I had fairly conservative views on the main political issues you can think of, including, the issue of pro-life/abortion, or issues around sexuality, gender. And then it really wasn't until later in my life, after going to medical school and those views, holding on to them by thread. But it was later, as I started to kind of become more saturated in the culture, in a kind of secularized culture. Even my faith was starting to kind of fall apart. I started to feel like as if my identity, there was a crisis that was happening, and a sense of, okay, I'm a Black person in a space of where there's white majority, and the narratives around negative experiences or outcomes for Black people, the assumption that race is somehow to be, the scapegoat for this. You've experienced racism. Of course, let it be clear, and I'm sure anyone who, we can all be honest and say, yes, racism can happen, has happened, and does happen. But this automatic assumption or attribution of race and racism as the best explanation for any kind of conflict or disparity that people of color experience, that started to become normalized, and I started to embrace that. And during that time of my own personal kind of internal crisis, figuring out who I am as I navigated this world, I started to be introduced to more literature that sort of confirmed this idea that as a Black person, it's me against the world, a world of white supremacy, that I'm, I need to articulate and kind of galvanize people together to kind of fight this demon of white supremacy, to borrow that kind of spiritual language, really. And so I saw from my own life that the how easy it was for me to become so totally absorbed in this kind of imaginary war. Again, not to say that real racism doesn't exist, but it was so exaggerated, the way in which I think every single instance of whether that was police brutality or negative interactions between the police or other issues being sort of used to substantiate this narrative that the oppressed, which are all people of color, need to rise up against white people. So I know what it's like as someone who has good intentions, who has a heart for justice, who wants to see some of the issues in our world, whether that's homelessness, poverty, lack of education, lack of real genuine opportunity. I want those things to be addressed, but it's so easy to buy into a narrative that demonizes one group against the other. And that's part of the reason I speak out about this, to kind of draw light on my own life and my own experiences in that space, and coming out of that, thankfully.
Well, what turned for you? Because clearly you were greatly influenced. I mean, it sounds like you were raised one way. I'm trying to wonder what your parents were thinking as you were making this turn to the left, and then you veered back to this side of, hold on a minute, we're blaming everything on race, everything. And if anyone wants to look for it, they can. I could find examples of sexism and misogyny at every turn if I chose to. If I wanted to look for it, I could do that at every turn. Look, see, they didn't ask me for my opinion because I'm a woman. I could do that, but I choose not to. So I'm just wondering where the turn back initiated.
Yeah, great question again. And I think fundamentally, I came to this stark realization that what we're dealing with here is a war on truth. It's an ideological war. It's this idea that it's a battle of ideas. And if somehow we can convince people that there isn't this idea of objective truth, that your feelings don't ultimately determine what reality is, that somehow this is what I felt that there was this realization that so much of what I was willing to throw away at truths that I held dear, because I just got so sucked into this kind of woke hysteria, and I just realized that I was willing to hurt people in the process. Dear friends, you mentioned my parents, goodness gracious, because part of the woke hysteria also made me deconstruct my faith and the heritage that was handed down for me. And of course, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking questions and genuinely pursuing truth, as you're trying to work out your faith. But this sort of kind of almost complete disavowal of Christianity, because it can be conveniently claimed to be the kind of the religious outplaying of the imperialistic structures of the world that just want to oppress people. And so it was just very convenient and very heartbreaking for my parents to witness that, but they continue to pray and support me in the background. And I've been able to have some wonderful reconciling conversations with them about some of the ways that I behave towards them as well. And that's the thing. And I'll share this really briefly. At my grandmother's funeral in 2019, I met my aunt, who I'd not seen for many years. So she's actually technically the widowed wife of my uncle, who died tragically at a car accident in Jamaica when they came out when I was only around 14, and I hadn't seen her for years. And she was there at the funeral, and I remember she mentioned, it just came up in one of the conversations we were having in my grandmother's house, that she supported Trump in his first presidency. And I remembered the disgust that I felt. I felt such like almost like kind of pity and contempt for her as she tried to explain her position, because of course I was caught up in the fever of feeling that I needed to demonize people just because they supported a particular president. And here's the thing: whether one supports Trump or not is not the issue here. It's what I'm trying to highlight is the mentality that I feel that I was so caught up in, that kind of a cult-like obsession, that it was even the way that I treated people that I should have treated differently was wrong. And so I'm again explaining this because the point I want to make is that the mentality, it drew me and made me behave in ways that I feel was unhelpful, unloving. And I think what we need to bring back to the discourse is sanity, is reason, is listening to each other rather than demonizing each other.
Wow. Yes, indeed. That is absolutely the case. We're talking with Dr. Joel Brown, and this is just a fascinating life and a fascinating journey. And we're going to continue, because I want to get back to, again, how he became so grounded, because to go from, as you described, this fever of feeling one way about things and living in this sort of thought bubble of everything is racist, everything is, about white versus black, to where you are now, which seems on very solid ground. That to me is a transition many people are afraid to make, because they feel it's an admission that they were wrong, or that the other side was right, and that we are so dug in on our sides. It's very difficult, I think, for some people to have the courage to take those steps. We're going to talk to Joel about that courage right after this. Well, here we are in 2023, and the economic outlook doesn't inspire me very much. I don't know about you, but there's one way to feel inspired about your financial future, and that's to invest in gold and silver. And the only company I trust when doing that is Legacy Precious Metals. You have options. You don't necessarily have to solely rely on the stock market, IRA, 401k. You can put gold into your portfolio. So gold prices are rising because investors are turning to gold as a hedge against inflation, protection against a weakening dollar. So contact Legacy Precious Metals. You need that investment that's going to protect your wealth and your retirement. Remember 2008? Folks who invested in gold saw significant gains. Other people lost their retirements. I recommend you contact Legacy Precious Metals. It's a great long-term play. You can speak directly to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals. Here's the number, 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. All right, back with Dr. Joel Brown. I want to read his pinned tweet, because I love this. Mm-hmm. I'm quote unquote black. And it's interesting. You did not capitalize black, as many people are would like you to do these days.
Mm.
Intelligent, university educated, well read, well spoken, under 40, a medical doctor, and I don't have my preferred pronouns in my Twitter bio, nor do I believe that, quote, white heteronormative patriarchy, unquote, is the greatest threat to human civilization. You have close to 19,000 likes on that particular tweet. It's just so interesting. The pronoun thing is something that I don't know why it bothers me as much as it does.
Mm.
I interact with a lot of people every day, and whether they are from my kids' school or from my own professional dealings, when I see pronouns at the bottom of their email address or on their Twitter handle, I just go, what the hell? I don't, and it's turned into this thing as though it's part of your signature, your identity. People must know.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? How did that happen?
I think a lot of it is what I would describe as, well, it's been called virtue signaling. I've come up with my own version of that term, I think, virtue farting.
Oh,
is this notion where is this notion where you've got to kind of present yourself as this kind of, it's this sort of sanctimony. I'm so moral.
I've got to write this down. I'm sorry, I can't forget.
But the thing is
keep going.
I just don't see the need. And I remember when I just see the emails, and I mean, fine, it's very much a part of the culture now, especially in academia. And I wrote that tweet. And by the way, I'm not trying to have a go at anyone. I'm just saying, you know what, that's not for me. You're not going to see that on my profile. I don't feel the need to, to tell people that, I'm a man. But at the same time, I just felt so much of that performance of this is what you need to say or do to give off the impression that you have the moral high ground, and I just find it unnecessary.
I do too. I do too. It's interesting to me that the word culture is rooted in the word cult, and yet culture is something we share, and part of our shared culture is language. And it seems to me that language is being distorted and twisted, and I feel like that's a dangerous trend, because we're changing the definitions of the definitions of words to help a particular cause or a viewpoint. And for instance, the term red pilled, I saw it may have been in Adam Coleman's recent Substack, and I read it and I said, I want to make sure I understand what the term red pilled means. And I found probably 10 different definitions, vastly different. It depended on who was talking about. Red pilled is when women find out that men have da 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 da. And I'm like, wait, that's not what he meant. I'm sure that's not what he meant. Then I found another definition, another. And this is, I think it's dangerous, because then you've got to walk on these eggshells to make sure you use the proper terminology, and heaven forbid you don't, and you make a mistake.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic reflection, and I mean, I'm by no means an expert in linguistics, but I mean, there are people like John McWhorter who's fantastic at that, just explaining the way that language does evolve. But I feel like in this sort of leftist kind of game, it is a word game, and there is this sense in which, as you said, we have to be tippy toes about what words you're allowed to use, what words can get you cancelled, and how words are being weird. I think the latest thing I read now is that a particular university department has said that we have to remove the word field so they can't talk about field practice or field work, because there is this feeling that it's upsetting to Black people and immigrants because of the history of I guess enslaved people that worked in the fields. And I mean, I'm just thinking, who really asked for that? I don't know any person defined as Black who would want that. It's just it's really unnecessary. And I think at the same time, the interesting thing is that again, words are important. When you think about even the consideration of issues of pro-life or abortion, again, for a long time for me, I was more left-leaning, pro-choice, and came to a place of really recognizing that a part of the way that many people have been duped into the kind of pro-choice, it seems sort of fairly liberal. Of course, yes, you want to give, and I do understand that that reproduction is a burden that the woman carries, and of course her choice in that is important. But the way in which, for instance, the sanctity of life in the womb is demonized, or it's just a clump of cells. Words can be used. Words can be like spells. They can be used to to subtly change your mind about the way you perceive the worth or value of things. So we've got to be really cautious and careful as we dissect and understand. As you said, I love the fact that you read the word, and you, instead of jumping to assume or project meaning, you were willing to go ahead and go, well, what does red pill mean in different contexts, and try to figure out what that word might have meant contextually.
Yeah, I still didn't really get my answer, but fortunately, in Adam's column, I figured it out because of the way that he used it. I figured out what he meant by it, but that,
Yeah,
again, that you could take a term and have it mean so many different things. You
absolutely.
are incredibly well educated. Obviously, you're a doctor, and you mentioned John McWhorter. I'm a huge fan of his writing as well, and all that he does.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I feel as though there must have been a moment for you, or a time in your life where you sort of you had a revelation, an epiphany, an awakening to where you were and how it was, in your words, a bit insane, a bit less
Yeah.
common sense than you maybe at a gut level knew. So what do you, can you attribute it to a moment?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I've given this some thought, and I've tried to express it in words and some of the things I've written on Twitter. So people feel free to follow me on Twitter to kind of get a little bit of the backstory as well. And they're
Please
really,
do.
thank you. And it's not like as if there was a singular moment, but what I do recall
Okay.
was just feeling this sense in which the way of viewing the world in the kind of far left extremes drew me to just view and perceive everything so negatively that it also compounded quite negatively on my own mental health. I felt quite anxious. I felt quite depressed. I felt like as if I couldn't trust people, especially white people, because even if they were nice to me, if they didn't speak out about this racial issue or that, I wouldn't be able to be that sure that they were definitely allies, unless they were performing allyship in some kind of really obvious way. There's so much of that
Right.
that I found so difficult. I think when I got to the bottom of it all, that there is this sense in which I feel like as if I'd pushed and lost so much. I lost my faith. I'd lost my my self-confidence, even despite what I've achieved, and whether that's education or not. There was still this sense of, I am an oppressed Black person because of history, and I therefore carry the weight, the vicarious burden of all of that history in me. And I can't, and there was a sense in which it's like as if my life was in a standstill. And for me, the multiple moments of recognizing that, of finding my faith again, of finding hope, and also finding that, that worldview is not required, as in the leftist view that I had, the extreme leftist view, is not required to be able to inspire people towards justice, towards addressing the issues in our world like poverty and so on. My grandmother, who was a lifelong, Christian woman in Jamaica, did incredible things motivated by her faith for the community that she served as an educator. And there's that kind of legacy that I was able to also be brought back to my mind, and just to find that hope again. And I think for me, it's just seeing the pain and the hurt that I caused, seeing the loss, coming to terms and realizing this sense of I need to hold on to the truth. And for me, I'm unashamed to admit the truth of who Christ is to me was one of the most fundamental truths to help to kind of just restore that sense of balance, that sense of I think, and then also realizing that we can truly love all people from wherever backgrounds they are, whatever they happen, whatever their gender, is or sexuality. I believe, and I'm compelled to do so. My faith is a sufficient basis, and I don't need to get caught up in this sort of Olympics of who's more oppressed than the other, and wage war against different groups.
And so you've used a couple words here, hope being one of them, and that you sort of, it sounds like you came from a dark place into a light place.
Yeah.
And I wish that for everyone, no matter where they are, to have hope, and your faith is clearly very important to you. I like to talk to people about this because I'm sort of in the middle of the road where it comes to faith. And I see people, and you are one of them. There are many. I used to work in professional sports, and so I've met coaches and players, all of whom had really deep faith and used terms like I live for an audience of one, and that audience is God, or I stand by the Lord. And I don't think I've ever found that particular feeling in my life. But I notice that people who have are really happy, hopeful, loving, open, and very often successful people. Not always. A lot of, people who are just striving to get along, but still have this deep faith and this kind of love in their hearts. And so if you could, how would you explain how you developed this relationship? Is it with Christ? Is it with Christianity? Was it just something that you were raised with and so was so embedded into you, or is this more than that?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain this, because I think what you said about relationship is so key. I was brought up in a fairly, a very Christian home. I could almost say I was born on a pew, and so that was what it was like. My dad, an elder, mom, a worship leader. I'm very musical, as you mentioned from my Twitter bio. So I grew up around that music, grew up around that heritage, and loved it and embraced it, and was baptized when I was 9. But the thing was, when I tell you that if you spoke to me a few years ago, I became absolutely just completely turned off religion altogether. I was an absolute atheist. I believed that religion was just fairy tales, imagination. I became I just felt that I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. I rebelled against it completely. And I think for me, in terms of where I got to in my heart space in this kind of in this transition, is that I realized that the disillusionment of society, how far that that we have gone as people in our tendency to rebel, how much we hurt each other, how much we distort truth for whatever agenda or whatever purpose, it can and oftentimes has been what if we look back, look more closely, we see that there has been that disconnect that has broken our sense of why would we want to trust the God who seems to allow for these things to happen in the world. And there was a sense of disappointment in my own life. It's just like, I just don't feel like I can trust you, God, with my own life, my own sense of frustration with my own identity, with what's going on in the world. But I think what it came down to, I kind of came to the end of myself, and I feel like God for me, and understanding Christ and what he's done for me, what the Bible teaches as it relates to, Christ coming from heaven to earth, nearly 2,000 years ago, as a baby in this place, where of course, as the story, not long gone past Christmas. And so we understand that there was, this contention in the land. And of course, there was, the census that was put forth for all boys to be killed. So you have this situation where Christ is born born in a place where, there was no room for him. And he came and he demonstrated a life where, I mean, despite the fact that he was hated and treated in the way that he was when he ultimately died, on the cross, he still loved those. He still loved his enemies. And I believe that what happened in his life, and the example of his life, was that this kind of radical love was able to overcome the evil, that even the greatest evil of his execution, and I believe obviously that he resurrected, and what he was really trying to model, and for us as those who believe in him and are his disciples, is how do we follow that example of selfless love, of standing firm in the truth, of when we're wrong, we say we're wrong, and we repent, and we trust God. And there's an opportunity in this relationship with Christ, with this kind of model of how to be in a world that seems so evil, that seems to be, just headlong into abandoning truth and distorting it. How are we to be in the world? And there is this radical love, that I'm able to love people that may hate me, call me names or whatever. And there's this restored sense of peace in the storm that I have, that despite the chaos in the world, I feel this, and I foster that relationship through prayer, worship. I play my piano and my guitar, and I have these moments. I share some of them on Twitter as well. And I share that not because I'm trying to necessarily, it's not like I'm trying to convince people. I just want to be sincere about what matters to me, and my heart and my relationship with God is so key. And I'm so grateful that it's been restored in this process. But I do also speak out about the things that I do in the political sphere, because I think as Christians, as people who follow Christ, we can't just sort of, I think it's important that we no longer just pretend that these things aren't important. We need to lend our voice to addressing these things as well.
Yeah, they are important. How did becoming a father change you?
Great question. I've got two beautiful daughters, and one is 8 and the other one's 6. And I'll tell you this, the second one came at a point where things were challenging and difficult, because my faith journey started just before then. So as I said, my faith deconstruction kind of led up to towards when I eventually kind of became much more on the left, the kind of left extremism, because of course at that point I just kind of truth was just out the window and it was all subjectivity. But when my second child was born, I called her Imani, and Imani is a word. I think it's Tanzanian. The word means faith. And even at the time when I was wrestling with all of that, there was something about looking at her face. It was just so transformative. It started to soften my heart. And even at the time when I thought faith is just a kind of a make-believe word at the time when she came along, I remembered just feeling like, she was starting this kind of process of softening my heart to kind of trust again, to believe again, to hope again.
That's amazing. It's an amazing story. And you are such a worthwhile follow on Twitter. So I want to promote it again. Hang on a second, because I don't have my glasses on, so I need to put them on. It's at Joel Brown MD. Joel, Joel Brown, MD. And you are and I see that your following is growing, which encourages me. Do you sense a shift in the way people are starting to look at all this insanity, or not? Are you hopeful?
I am. I can't help but be an optimist. And I tell you, the number one reason is I look at my own life. I would never, if you spoke to me again at the height of my participation in this very insanity, you would not believe that. You would believe these are just two different people. It's like a Paul and Saul, to borrow the biblical scenario, really transformative. And I believe that, that is possible through a combination of things. I think we've got to remember that these are still people. It's very easy to get caught up in the kind of tribalism of us versus them, but to see them as people. Some of them are our family members, even if they're estranged because of political views. There's a lot of division. I've seen families break down over these issues, and it's sad. But I believe that if we show that compassion to each other, we're willing to listen, even pray for each other, and then even people who are not sure where they stand on faith. I still believe that, just have that space in your heart to just think about those people who you think are so irredeemable or who are just lost, and still have that compassion to say, you know what, I'm going to treat them right. I'm going to show love to them, be kind to them, and have conversations where where the opportunity arises, and just show them information, show them reason as well, and show them facts, and you'll be surprised that people can change. It's not easy, and there's a lot of resistance to this, because I think depending on how deep you're into it, it's like it affects the way you think on a very subconscious level. But I still remain
There's no
hopeful, and I
question.
want to be part of the solution.
I love that. I love that. And I'd love to talk to you again. There's so much we didn't even get into. I mean, it's an expansive topic, and it affects so many areas of everyday life. I don't know if you're familiar, because I'm not sure how around the world this story got, but we had a member of the Buffalo Bills injured about a week ago, and he had to be resuscitated on the football field during a primetime Monday night football game with millions and millions of viewers. And his name is Damar Hamlin, and this phrase, "pray for Damar," went everywhere. Some people chose love for Damar instead of pray, but there was an awful lot of the word pray going around. Prayer for him, raise up prayers. And it was unusual. And I think because it occurred in professional sports, which is a little bit of a left-leaning institution these days, it was surprising, but it was also kind of uplifting. And I don't know, how much of that story were you aware of over there in the UK?
I definitely was aware, and it was because of Twitter. So thanks to Twitter and Elon Musk and the rest of the crew there that making this
no kidding
get news. It touched me so deeply. It touched me so deeply to see the fact that he's come round as well. And I mean, it's I'm a testament. I'm a living testament that prayer works for sure. But to see that happen in that setting, and see people come together, people who may not necessarily be religious they felt moved to come around. I remember seeing pictures of so many of the teammates around on kneeling actually to pray rather than some virtue signaling thing. They were kneeling down together, black, white, everybody down on their knees, saying, God, help, please bring this brother through. And cardiac arrest, I could tell you from a medical point of view. I mean, I think that statistically it's quite low. If you've had your heart stop and had to do CPR, I mean, I consider it almost a miracle that he's come around and that he's well and back in the land of the living. Then the important message there is that at the core, I think as human beings, I believe genuinely that we have this spiritual sense. We have this sense of, and I think it's something that can unite us, even in the most divided times, as you said, even on platforms where that's not the thing to do, to pray. It's like, it's football. Let's just play the game and we pay our money. But at that point, in that weakness, in that moment, that solidarity of us coming together, and that's why I think it's just crucial that we continue to acknowledge. And that's one of the things I do see on the right. There is this sense of holding on to the virtues of things like prayer as important. Whether one even prays that much or not, seeing its value of the tradition of prayer and the utility of that and worship. I think it's important that we just as societies don't just abandon things because we think, that's just tradition of yesteryear. That there is value that we should
right.
We shouldn't be too quick to discard.
Precisely. Well said. Again, love to have you back. What a great conversation. Dr. Joel Brown. Find him at Joel Brown MD on Twitter. It's a great follow, and he's inspiring, as you can see. Thank you for being here with
Thank
us. I
you. And I'll
really
continue to pray
appreciate it.
for you and your cast as well. You take care and be blessed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. He is Joel Brown. I'm Michelle Tafoya. This is Sideline Sanity. As I always say, be brave and do good. Thanks for listening. Always a good day when Charles Thorngren of Legacy Precious Metals can join us and answer some really different questions. And I thought of a few new ones for you, Charles, if that's okay. Yeah, I'm fascinated, and we hear so much about gold and silver and precious metals. So if I could just ask this broad question, what is the role of gold in a portfolio?
Great question. And when we look at that, and the answer to that has a couple different features to it. It depends on the individual, but its main purpose is the insurance policy for your finances. It is meant to be the foundation by which you do all other things, right? We know that gold and silver have an inverse relationship to the dollar. It protects your purchasing power. So when we invest, that's what we're saying. We want to make sure that we have the ability to manage our money and have our money do what we need it to do for us. It's not the collection of dollars for dollar's sake, but for what it does for us, how we pay our bills, how we retire, how we feed our family, how we go on and bless others and donate to causes we believe in. That's what money does for us. It's not the dollar itself. It's the thing it provides for us. And what gold does is make sure that that money continues to have purchasing value.
Because there are times we find that, hey, my money doesn't have the same purchasing value it had last month.
Absolutely. And this is a unique time. We're seeing it. This term called hyperinflation, which usually refers to, inflation in the 18s and 20%. I consider this a time of hyperinflation because it's so much more than what we're normally used to, right? When we prepare and we budget and we say, this is the course of my life and this is how I'm going to do things, this is where I'm going to put my money, we use some basic numbers. 2 to 3% inflation, that's what the Fed says is good. But that's not even great. Over a lifetime, that's a lot of inflationary loss to your dollar. But when you have a period where it jumps to the points where we're at now, and we're in the 8.5s, 9s, going to be into the double digits soon, in this shorter time frame, that's a hyperinflation situation to me because it throws everything off dynamically and so radical.
You do see us going into double digits, huh?
Absolutely. The Fed even sees us going into double digits. There was an interesting report where one of the Fed chairman were saying, 2023, we're not going to talk about that. But in 2024, by summer, we may be able to start to drop the interest rates. When someone tells me they're in charge of something, but they say this new year that's coming, just forget about that completely. We're not even going to talk about that. That's a bad sign.
They don't want you to think about it.
Exactly.
They want you to look past it and sort of write it out.
Write it off right now. Just don't even think about it. It's going to be bad. But hey, 2024 though, and interestingly enough, right around the time of an election, they want to start talking about what they're going to do.
Isn't that fascinating? That timing is just really interesting. Before we finish up here, I'm always fascinated with how gold is priced. How do we get a price of gold?
The spot price of gold is really determined by the world market, the London Bullion Exchange, right? And this has been for hundreds of years now, sets a price, and the rest of the world revolves around that. Now, our currency will determine how much more than it is in the pounds and things like that. And there's a calculation for it. But that's one of the great things about gold and silver. Their value is recognized around the world. No matter what currency, what country you're in, it has value. I just recently come back from a trip where I was overseas not that long ago, and I bring gold with me everywhere I go. Not a lot, so don't try to catch me in the airport. But I have something that is valuable no matter where I'm at. I can go anywhere in any country and turn that into its currency in no time at all.
You're talking about carrying around physical gold?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. Do you
How
walk
much
around
is
with
safe to
dollars?
carry around if you're well? No, you're right. So if and that gold is going to have the same value across the board, no matter where I go,
Slight
right?
deviations,
Because
very slight deviations,
yeah,
but it's not very large.
okay,
Usually less than
yeah.
1% difference in the
This
price.
is really interesting. I can't let you go before I ask you this because I'm picturing you now walking around with some gold coins in your pocket. I'm thinking, wow, that would feel risky. But when you go into another country, for instance, with some gold, how easy is it for you to go say, here, I want to exchange this for, or, I'm assuming you're not going to a restaurant and slapping down a
No,
gold bullion or something.
no. But you could overseas. In certain places of the world, they recognize that just like regular currency.
Wow.
But I wouldn't use gold
But
for
it's
dinner.
easy to exchange once you get to another country.
Yeah,
Just
very easy. Most of the time, you can do it at the
interesting.
airport. Same places where they change currency. A lot of them will change metals too.
And is physical bullion the best way to go?
It is. It really is.
When you're traveling, or always in any investment in gold?
There's certain things you can do outside of just bullion that may make sense once you've laid a portfolio down, right? Diversity in metals is important too, but your basis for all investments should be your basic bullion, whether it's gold or silver. You want to have that foundation set in the base metal itself, giving you the most value that you can get.
And obviously, every person's situation is unique. So why not just call and speak to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals? 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or they can always download your free investor's guide, right?
This is
It's
true.
at legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. Do you have any gold on you right now?
I do. Give me half a second.
I got to see this. I just want to see. I mean, it seems like almost like in the old days when you walk around with that, Mr. Scrooge and his gold coins in his pocket. Not that you're Scrooge. Can you sort of turn it around and show us that? That's now for our listeners. They're not going to be able to see what we're seeing, but you've got a little container, and they're kind of the size of $50, right?
Yeah, just about a half dollar. And this
Quarters,
is the American Gold Eagle, and this is $22,000 worth of metal.
Yikes. Charles isn't messing around, and neither are we. But please go get your questions answered. This is such an important time to be thinking about your money, your long-term play, in addition to every short-term concern that you have. Charles, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And you know what? 2023 is coming. Call now, find out, so you can make your decisions before then.
Yes, and before the elections again,
Yes.
and they can tell us what they're going to tell us then. They're telling you to overlook 2023. That means now's the time to inquire.
Absolutely.
Again, legacypminvestments.com. Charles Thorngren, always good to see you.
Thank you.